You're listening to the Middlemen podcast, this week with Scott Messer and Tom Limongello.
And we're live. Hello out there, LinkedIn. Happy Friday lunchtime. And hello to Tom and Scott.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you.
So I'm Kiri. I'm from the Retail Media Breakfast Club podcast. And this is a first of its kind crossover to the Middlemen podcast. Let me just tell you how I discovered the Middleman. So I was listening to, I can't remember which episode it was, but Tom, you said something along the lines of, well, on-site retail media is the new type of retail media. Off-site's been around forever. And I was like, wow, that's a perspective I've never heard before. I've got to tune into these guys and see what they're all about. So that's what I appreciate about the Middleman is, look, the history that you guys have of the ecosystem, not just this ecosystem, but programmatic performance, like previous eras of advertising that I didn't grow up exposed to, are definitely worth checking out.
Well, thank you for having us on. We love your newsletter, your podcast, because you are talking to all the practitioners and you're doing it from, your background being with Amazon and in the agency world, talking about it from the brand perspective. So I think where we came out as the middlemen, a lot of retailer and publisher perspective. And so seeing it, through the looking glass is really important. Otherwise it's just the sell side sort of talking to itself. So we're lucky to be with you.
Yeah, I kind of think of it this way, like there's kind of four corners to the ecosystem. You've got the brands, the consumer brands, the retailers, the tech providers, and then the media buyers like the agencies. And there's no one person I've met that has deep experience in all four of those areas. Usually people come from one primary domain, and that means that we're all kind of learning about the other three areas or maybe the other two areas that we haven't been exposed to. So I like to think we're all beginners. That's why I enjoy learning from you guys on the tech side, because my experience is more on the brand side. Well, I would love to hear actually, before we jump in, a little bit more about how you came to the tech side of
world and the tech side. I can start, and then Scott has a very interesting background as well. So on my side, my early days was I worked for Unilever in China, and so I got to see from the brand perspective how a foods business sort of got off the ground in a totally different part of the world with brands that were not native or endemic to that area. And then as I moved along in my career, getting into the tech world, I worked in the mobile space for a provider of just development of mobile sites that turned into this ad platform that eventually got bought by coupons.com, which turned into Quotient. And that is sort of the reason I'm able to do a podcast now, is that most of the people who worked at Quotient are now at places all over the industry, on the tech vendor side, at the retailers and things like that. For me, it's been an understanding of what the tech vendors are trying to do to win over the retailer, and then helping them win over the brands. That's really the perspective that I've brought.
Yeah.
And from my side, I've been on the creator side for over 25 years, starting in the film industry and then transitioning into digital media.
Oh, no kidding.
I have an IMDb page. You can go check out some of my credits. Oh yeah, there's a real nugget of Scott Messer history hidden in my IMDb page if you'd like to go find it. And so working on the digital media side, coming up through companies like National Lampoon, where we had the first comedy network of websites and radio as well, and closed circuit college television shows, all the way to working at a company called Demand Media, or Leaf Group, where I was there for 10 years and oversaw all things business development, ad tech, programmatic, audience data, privacy, as well as running a large swath of the portfolio at those sites, over about 50 websites. multiple languages, peaking at maybe like 60 million monthly uniques inside just that piece of the portfolio. And then getting to do M&A work through that company. So I've sort of seen like everything there is to see on the sell side from a traditional web publisher perspective, including SEO and like how that whole thing works. And it's been really fascinating to watch this move into the retail media space, where I think like so many of these retailers, when you start selling ads, you are a publisher. The content is different, but like you are a publisher and really you're a sell sider. And there's so many parallels between what digital web publishers have gone through and what retail media is experiencing, that when you really step back from it, you just see these bigger patterns and loops. Even though while you're in the middle of it, you might just feel like you're inside the washing machine. But this is actually a pretty predictable pattern, and I'm excited to get into some of those with everybody.
Oh my gosh, that's a great jumping off point. Just a quick question. How many retailers like being called publishers?
That is a good question.
Not many of them. We've actually, none of them have like rejected it. I don't think they quite understand what the comment means yet.
Yeah.
And some of them still have like a very MarTech. I think the harder one isn't whether you're a publisher. It's like, do you think you're MarTech or do you think you're ad tech? And most of them still think that they're MarTech.
What's the difference?
One is for marketing and one is for selling ads. And really, MarTech to me is more about buying ads, and ad tech is really the selling of ads. But I think that retail media needs to focus more on ad tech, because it's all the same platforms and tools that we've used: ad servers, SSPs, DMPs, CDPs, in the same ways that we utilize it for selling. And yield management is something really big that doesn't exist in MarTech, that does exist in ad tech. And I don't think enough retailers are focusing on the ad tech side of it. And if you look at the people that they're hiring, a lot of them come out of ad tech and traditional ad tech backgrounds, not the MarTech side.
And I think that, thank you in the comments mentioning our Mark Williamson episode from Costco. I think the tension a lot of the times really is just sort of the retailer's DNA is being a buyer, not a seller. And I think that just understanding that, how hard is it to get somebody who's a buyer to be a seller? That's usually pretty, that's a very big evolution.
There's a lot of people with like CMO titles and marketing titles that are now heads of revenue. And that's not, it's just incompatible to start, but you're starting to see them split. And you see the biggest retail media networks have already made those jumps. CVS has a long laundry list of ad tech people, like from Melissa Gallo all the way over. Walmart have already made that jump. But you see the other ones, they're like, well, who do we have on the team? And they all come from the marketing side because they don't have ad tech.
And you see that as a big gap. Like if there was a bit more effort to recruit sort of divert people in from ad tech, what would that solve?
Well, it's also, do you want to live in Woonsocket? Do you want to live in Boise? These are not where media people exist yet. And maybe it'll happen. Maybe it means that retail media will seed all the rest of the parts of the country with media people. That could be an amazing thing. But right now it's sort of a logistical challenge.
It's a do as much as you can with like your current what you have, and want to make more investments into your business. You'll start hiring more specialized people, but there's no reason why these people that are really great at buying media can't also understand selling media. But there is a little bit of a hurdle into what's an ad server, what's an ad tech, how do we do these things? So
why do you think they haven't though? Like what's stopping the retailers from like really just showing up as a publisher and bringing on board the ad tech people? Like it kind of, as you talk about it, Scott, it seems obvious. Like, is there a resistance there or just not something that's been thought about?
No, it's a time thing. I think the more you get specialized into process and operations of selling ads, you start to fall into a more traditional model of sellers, account managers, ad traffickers, and then a tech and yield team. Whereas before it sort of all came out of like the product and engineering side, and then there was some support. And as they start to turn over their teams a little bit and evolved into new models, they look for people that have more function specific roles, which move them from MarTech to ad tech. So I don't think it's resistance, it's just a time thing. And I understand that people want to start with what they have because doing it the other way is very expensive.
Well, we have a question from the audience that I think is relevant. Jordan
Yeah.
Whitmer had asked, is there enough demand on retailers to make that shift? The retailers to date largely haven't had to earn the majority of the ad dollars with performance and capability. I'm not sure I totally get the question exactly, but I think generally what I'm hearing is it still too early? My other thing I would add there is, have they been outsourcing it to date? Is another challenge, because if a vendor is doing this for you, you don't necessarily have to do the business transformation internally on your team yet. So
I have a different read on Jordan's question,
yeah,
and which is this is run this concept by you guys, see what you think. So I call it the retail media doom loop,
ah,
and so it goes like this. So Amazon and Walmart command the lion's share of retail media today. Could quibble over the percentages, but everyone more or less agrees with that. Okay, so retailers get bought into the big vision of retail media. It's super profitable. It's the thing to do. Everyone's talking about it. So they stand up a business and a team.
yep,
And then to Jordan's question here, actually, a lot of the initial retail media revenue is kind of maybe not deliberately, but it is siphoned off from trade media and shopper marketing into retail media. So
is it
initially,
truly incremental? Yeah,
there's a big like growth spurt initially. They see some quick wins, then growth slows because the trade dollars run out, and then the retailer doesn't want to invest in new technology or hire the experienced salespeople or the ad tech people because the
yeah.
growth is slowing, and then it kind of rolls to a stop. What do you
I mean,
think?
I think it's, yeah. Initially, everybody's been aping Amazon from the sponsored search introduction in like 2014 to 18, saying, "Oh, we can increase ROAS," but you can't increase ROAS forever. If you start with a situation where you have products in a search grid that show up initially when there's no sponsored placements, there is a real opportunity to create high initial ROAS. But then over time, if it becomes a competitive market, then everybody's spending, and then you sort of go back to where you were at the beginning. But if you look at offsite and other channels in store, if you're digitizing it, um, there are places where ads may not have been before, where you can
Mm.
really bring in real incremental opportunities for awareness or mid-level awareness. And I think that's where, if that, if they're scaling this demand from the initial onsite to offsite, that could really work. And that's sort of where we started, right, Kiri? Because you said, it's always onsite first and then offsite. I think a lot of the smaller retailers started with minimal traffic onsite, started offsite, and realized this early on. But they were probably doing it with like a turnkey ad server,
Yeah.
vendor, where they didn't do that business transformation in house, and maybe they're stuck.
Hmm. Yeah. So just to put a point on Jordan's question before we move on, this demand question on the retailer's side is, there's the growth has slowed. The rate of growth has slowed, right? So is there enough juice for the 238 248 other retail media networks to continue to scale?
I saw Jordan's question a little bit differently, and thank you, Jordan, for such a great one. And John Arante in the comments, thank you for validating my ad tech versus martech comment. I think it's for Jordan, it's are buyers putting enough pressure, are brands putting enough pressure on retailers to require an upskilling of talent and demonstrating performance, sort of saying that a lot of the money just came from strong arming you into spending in the retail media network if you wanted to continue having your products in store, and like they haven't had enough demanded of them yet. And that's a really interesting, and I think that's sort of the question here is like, what's the buyer's POV of the tech under the hood? And it's not just the tech, it's also the people and the culture and the process that sort of gets into it. because you don't know what you're buying always when you get into these retail media networks. You just know you're handing over a chunk of money to somebody to do some marketing for you.
Mm. Well,
So
actually,
yeah,
I read a survey a couple of weeks ago. 67 respondents. I did say brand side buyers only, and
That's a lot for a brand.
I had to weed out all the ad tech people that jumped in and voted. So anyway, this is all brands. I checked every single person, and this kind of drives me crazy because I do talk with a lot of tech providers out there who are not allowed to talk about who is using their technology. And to me, it seems a little uh, counterintuitive. Like if you're a retailer and you're investing in technology and you're stewarding your brand's media dollars, I would want to be out there talking about investments that I'm making in ad serving and relevancy and reporting. So I don't understand it. And I was curious, do media buyers feel the same way? Do they feel like if they knew a little bit more about what was going on in terms of the pipes, would that influence their decisions? And poll
So
says yes.
yeah, I mean, we had a good episode with Eleanor Hayden from Hayden Consultancy, and she gave us a lot of the sort of differences that she saw between retailer media networks in the on-site world. So it was, Target and Walmart gave real, granularity in terms of the types of placements and carousels that you could buy. And so that was interesting for me to see, like that's something that a real brand buyer wanted. Whereas I think a lot of the smoke and mirrors around, is it all going to be about clean rooms or whatever? And most of the brands that I've talked to have said, AMC is really good. I got a 5-year look back from Amazon.
Mm,
And most of these brands aren't really leveraging it to the way that they should be or could be. So that's
right.
probably not, that's probably not it. But I think we should talk about, this is sort of where the buyer's checklist would come through, which is like, what are the things that a tech provider could do that would make it a different proposition? I mean, and my initial thought is that some of the areas where, if we are in this sort of doom loop that everybody is sort of maybe invested in on-site and doesn't know where to go to next, really where the challenge would be is, does the ad tech provider have a sort of unified platform to be able to move budget in a more agile way away from non-performing channels? Because I think one of the challenges with retail media networks is that because they may not have either the top talent or tech, they are looking at things in a very rigid way where you're booking mobile, you're booking digital out of home or whatever, and they're kind of like stuck. These budgets are not fluid. And that's probably going to remove some of the performance possibilities you could have. So if I were on the brand side, or if I were a media buyer who had, access to, these budgets, that's what I would want to be able to do.
Mm.
it's a good little rabbit hole for us to dive into. But I think when you look in like the broader context of our conversation, um, what is the buyer's POV on tech, right? And there's so many different ways to get into this, and um, across our entire conversation here, I've been thinking about the parallels to regular media and how does this affect brands, retailers, and across the top, which is what our conversation is today. Um, and I don't know. One thing I want to posit to you is like what people say in a poll is very different from what they actually do during the day. And
You got me.
as a media seller, I've learned this because you hear a lot of the, oh, we want transparency, we want fraud free, we want all of that, and then they go, yeah, but can you just go spend my money and tell me what I got as a ROAS?
Mm-hmm.
And that that's a fatal sin, I think, in all of digital media and ad tech and commerce media, is just the like, can you spend my money for me and tell me how we did? Like, I I like what your poll says, that people do care, but I don't think that's how they're moving with their feet or their fingers on a keyboard.
Well, there's a few other factors at play, which is JBPs and the overall agreement with a retailer, which is one of the ways that retail media does seem to me to be different to programmatic and like previous eras of display advertising as well. So you have a relationship with a retailer where there's a whole bundle of things going on. You need to be negotiating with them to get your products on their shelves a lot of the time. And so a lot of the money that you're spending with them kind of goes to maintaining that relationship. And then retail media is like entering sort of fuzzy ground that is kind of performance media, sometimes brand, and then also just like keeping the lights on with the relationship. So there is in some of these relationships more stick than carrot, I would say. And that's part of the issue why, if it was purely a math decision, I think retail media would get spent, but perhaps a little bit differently, and there would be more of a, in an economics term, perfect competition. There's not perfect competition in retail media.
Yeah, that friction, the stick and carrot friction that you're talking about there makes some of this business stick. But if you know anything about friction in business, is that it is want to be removed, and I think over time retailers will lose the ability to force brands to spend through their retail media networks. And you're going to start seeing it pop up in other places that look like retail media networks.
Like AI?
AI, I think, is going to eat the digital web publishers' lunch in several areas, specifically media spend. But what about like a retailer versus an Instacart or a DoorDash?
Yeah.
I'm going to let Tom plug our ad server wars again discussion, but I'm going to posit here that what if those Instacarts and those aggregators are like the walled gardens of Facebook and TikTok, and the retailers are like the individual websites that exist in the open web?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so we had first of all, you're listening to and watching potentially Kiri Masters of the Retail Media Breakfast Club, and I'm Tom Limongello, and I'm here with Scott Messer from the Middlemen. I want to do a little station identification because some people might be joining late, but we've had some really great comments and questions from the audience. And because we have some brands on here, we have some anonymous comments because corporate comms are very strict at brands. But we had a question about to follow on to what Scott was just talking about. The walled gardens, like the PMaxes of the world and the Facebooks, give some really good granularity. They may not have the conversions, but they give you a lot of really great ad tech tools. Are the retail media networks doing that? And the same thing can be said for the commerce intermediaries, DoorDash, Instacart. And I think that there's a real challenge here, both in terms of what is the tech that's being provided on a plain vanilla retail media network versus one of these more D2C, very consumer friendly, highly integrated identity platforms that are shown via mobile app. And I think there's also just a thought that the retail media world is in this problem where there's tons of retail media networks that are not aggregated, but these commerce intermediaries are aggregating the retailers. And we don't really talk about that a lot. We don't talk about how you can get at the, schnuck audience by going into Instacart and, like that whole world. People are saying, oh, when are the retail media networks going to aggregate and create a co-op? Well, they already sort of are. And that may be the reason why some of those efforts have stalled.
Let's talk more about that, because I've been digging into this topic recently, and there's many, many more points of view that I need to dig in and share. But it has come up a number of times about co-ops and federations and things like that. And this is where actually I really want to get your guys' perspective, having seen previous eras of advertising. Like, what have we seen from history? Like, how could this work? How could it also go wrong?
So some really good examples of vendor-led co-ops that are informative on this example. One is you had Grocery One by Epsilon, and that came out I think 2021 or something like that. So during the pandemic, I was at Quotient at the time, and we were trying to figure this out too. It was, how do we get these small retailers like Giant Eagle, some of the regional players to put together. And in the case of Grocery Run, they used inventory. They used ad inventory, owned and operated ad inventory as the sort of model. Fast forward to today, you have Bridge Cardlytics offering the Ripple network, and that's an audience-based co-op. And so there's two options where neither of these are lighting the world on fire, but they are ways of bringing smaller retailers into a world where there's more aggregated scale. But in both cases, you have a vendor leading it. So there's, potentially the incentives may not be there. But, that's one area. And then there's also, I think probably Scott would want to talk about how, maybe it's not a co-op, it's more an SSP joins and connects to Instacart and things like that. So
yeah, there's a lot to talk about that, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think as a parallel for how sellers sell things and band together to do it, we can look in some of the digital media worlds where it's happened. There were like audience co-ops. It's like, hey, let's put all of our data together and sell it together. Those didn't really work. There was a lot of competition problems. Buyers still didn't want this stuff. They just wanted to buy from Lotame and Blue Kai and Xlate and like whatever it was. And then there's also like the concept of sales houses, where a publisher will outsource all of their sales to a Raptive, a Mediavine, Freestar, Playwire, all these companies that exist. And those single entities will go out and represent several publishers, thousands in most cases, and bring demand in. And I can see a point where a lot of these retailers are struggling to make sales. Sales teams are very expensive. Sales tools are expensive. And they just say, you know what? I really wish somebody could just sell for me. And you might see alliances form there. And I think we see some vendors that have like unified sales fronts that sort of do that. So I'm going to see that coming out. And then you have the effects of what I call the walled gardens of like the Instacarts and these things. They're allowing programmatic demand to come in already. And so the DSPs can buy Instacart demand, right? Just in the way that you can Meta, Google, Pinterest, whatever it may be. And you're going to start seeing more money flow into DSP to SSP to, what do you call them? Commerce intermediaries?
Yeah.
You're going to see more programmatic demand coming, where all this reservation-based retail media buying will be good, but you're going to look at that pipe of what looks like automatic revenue, and you're going to wonder, how do I get some of that? Because there are buyers who only want to transact through a DSP. It's the only way you can get their money. And you're going to start with programmatic guaranteed, which is basically moving a digital IO to a programmatic system, and it's the same thing. And then you're going to do private deals, because somebody's going to want to like offer you something, but it's going to be non-guaranteed. And then you're going to open up to open auction demand. This is exactly the way it went for digital web publishers. This is exactly what is happening inside CTV. You can look at Netflix going from, we don't do ads, do we do some ads, do we do this? And now they have Magnite repping them. And I'm sure that buyers are knocking down their doors saying, I want to buy you in the open auction so I can just buy the users I want. And with that comes intense CPM compression and the flooding of inventory into the market. So I caution every retailer, every seller in the world, protect what is holy to you and do not let it out of your systems. Invest in your sales, invest in your technologies. You must be able to meet or beat the capabilities of the walled gardens if you want to protect your sales, which means you need to deliver ROAS, you need to deliver sales, you need to deliver insights, you need to deliver log files to your buyers.
What? Can you say that again?
Log files. Ari Paparo believes that, if you don't know, is the founder of Architecture Media, worked at DoubleClick, wrote Yield. and sold beeswax, built and sold beeswax, says that log files are a constitutional right of a buyer. And I kind of agree with him, and of a seller too.
How many retail, sorry, just one quick question. How many retail media networks currently offer log files?
One. I have an uneducated opinion. I think that number is one, and I think it's Amazon.
Speaking of Amazon, Amazon's retail ad service, they recently signed on Macy's.
Yep.
Thoughts on whether they will extend that bench beyond what they have right now?
Well, considering that it took them from January or CES to now to be able to announce one, that's slower than I thought it would have been. But yeah, I don't really have a lot of thoughts around is it going to grow, because I think it will take time for retailers to, one, warm up to the idea of sharing data with Amazon, no matter how safe it may be. And two, we looked at the product there, and it was all sponsored products. So if it's not going to be full funnel, is there a reason to move from what you're currently using?
Right. Well, I'm also just thinking of what Scott was saying. Scott's appeal to the retailers out there, like protect what is yours. So
Loyalty, identity, the relationship with the customer, and the ability to drive results for your other clients, which are the brands, right?
Yeah.
Digital web publishers lost so much power when Facebook became a really competitive area for brands to advertise. The open web did not grow from 2017 to 2018. It went from 75 billion in revenue to 85 billion in revenue, which is nothing. The rest of the digital web spend went from like 100 billion to like 400 billion. And all that went into search, social, retail, and all the other channels. Because other effective places sprang up. So if you want to continue to own your budget, you must be effective. Otherwise, buyers will move to other places. Like James Tenser asked us, how does a CPG brand going to align with their retail media spending with the actual product distribution through 150 plus regional grocers, let alone like 5 national grocers? That's a great point. Like, where does a brand spend money, and like how many relationships do you want? This is the same thing that we had with direct sales with web sellers. How many Condé Nast and Hearsts and like those are you going to contract in your IO business when you finally say, you know what, let's just use a DSP and I can reach 90%, 95% of that, and I only have to talk to one person. I'm not threatening. I am prognosticating, and I am like the ghost of Christmas past, coming to warn you of the future that is ahead.
Very good.
Like, this is what will happen because buyers want it to be easy, and they want to be James and like aggregate all that spend. And the only way you can do it is through programmatic or through buyer networks.
Again, from my anonymous back channel of LinkedIn questions that are not public on the comments here, I think the reaction from the retailer side is probably like, all of these small retailers, if I'm put into a group, is that going to put an arbitrary floor on the CPM, CPCs that I can charge? And so I think we were talking about that. Just generally, like, if if a vendor is controlling this, or even a commerce intermediary is controlling it, how do they know that they're getting their fair share of, their share of voice? How are they making sure that they show up? And you see that in the sales models from the Criteos and the Epsilons, and, like, some of them have network models, some of them have more federated models. So, those are the types of things that I think the retailers are grappling with before they allow any sort of aggregation to happen. Not to say that they haven't already.
So besides Instacart, who would you categorize as a commerce media intermediary?
DoorDash, definitely. Uber is interesting because they're kind of using carrot ads already as infrastructure. And so I think DoorDash and Instacart are now sort of exporting their infrastructure in the same way that Amazon is.
Interesting. Well, for anyone just tuning in, just want to recap who's on the screen, what we're doing here. So I'm Kiri from Retail Media Breakfast Club, and it's a special collaboration that I'm doing with the Middlemen today, Tom Limongello and Scott Messer. We're talking all things retail media, ad tech. Let me pull up. I had a couple more good questions
Yeah,
come
while
in.
you're doing that, it's a collab. Does that mean we need merch? Oh boy. I don't know.
Well, that was actually what we've mentioned a couple of times in passing. Ari Paparo's book, Yield, and Middleman is not used in like the most like
Oh no.
glowing context. So
Yeah, that is
this is
by
something you're really
design.
owning.
Yeah, you got to sort of own it. And to me, middlemen obviously can be seen as somebody who takes a tax, but it's also those people who sit in between very large companies and make actual business opportunities happen. And so I think that's when Scott and I work together as consultants, and the ability to sort of help these large organizations these giants that can't really sort of transact with each other without some real sort of diplomacy and thinking and transformation. Um, that it's an exciting place to be. So yeah, I'll call myself a middleman.
I think what Tom means to say is that we're the middlemen who make efficiency of the middle rather than the middlemen who just extract tax from the
Yeah,
middle.
You might need to work on that tagline a little bit.
It's a
So
little
yeah, you're
long.
right.
I don't think it'll fit on a mug. Yeah.
We had a good question from Amelia Costa talking about the new media mix model that we're seeing from Google Meridian, Meta's Robin. I don't know if you would also look at like Circana's Fluid something Max thingy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Circana really works with the non-walled garden retail media networks, because consumer insights right now is changing a lot, and so there's a real opportunity for somebody, Nielsen, Circana, or somebody, to come in there and bring sales data and incremental lift into a model in a way that is holistic. So another sort of buyer's checklist. One of the things that we got hammered on at Quotient was that we didn't have the ability to manage frequency across all the channels, because all we saw was retail media, which at the time was a smaller part of the media buying. It's growing and the channels are expanding to sort of cover everything. But even still, retail media has very much, and you've talked about this a lot, Kiri, is that it's very much a one-trick pony in terms of measurement, and that needs to change. And so, yeah, I think it's a good thing if MMM models evolve and retail media networks use them, if they can, get their hands around it.
James says, before we move on to this question, James Tenser says wholesalers or middlemen exist as long as they add value. Oh.
I'd love to agree with that, but I know a lot of them that don't add value and are definitely still around.
All right, here's one from Lisa Tan. What's our opinion on the brand marketing budgets splitting their marketing into collecting first-party data and relying heavily into retail media budgets, which is arguably third-party data that they are unlikely to get access to? Any sense of past, current, and future percent split?
I don't know if I know the percent split, but yeah, you're hearing a lot of retail media networks now talk about new to brand. And that wasn't the case a few years ago. It was always sort of like, this is about your current shoppers. And the only thing that could sort of happen to you is that, if it's a Nestle brand, it's definitely your brand buyers, but you could also sort of gain from the rest of the shoppers who don't currently buy your brand. And now new to brand is a big metric. But in terms of the idea that you're literally going to CTV now and potentially having broader reach and finding people who've never bought you before, from the measurement side, retail media isn't really set up to do that. So it is a good point. And that's where I think the promise of clean rooms was supposed to change that. I don't think it's really here yet.
Yeah, I think that there's an evolution here, and it's certainly something that retailers see a big opportunity for, is a full funnel capability, because it means that they can tap into a truly incremental pot of money from brands, which is their brand marketing budget, as opposed to, we spoke a little bit before, sometimes the immediate immediate influx of money into a retail media network is essentially coming from trade marketing, and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if you can build more of a brand marketing capability, then that's net new dollars coming from TV or social or some other pot
But
of.
there's also, yeah, like there is actually, we had a great episode with Josh Ginsberg at Break Time Media a couple weeks ago, and in that case, he is basically creating experiences, web experiences, like basically the direct brand, like a brand page that used to be a very boring thing, and tying it to in-store events like with Walmart and barbecue events and things like that. Olipop's site, bringing in sort of like capabilities around generative AI to help you come up with recipes and things like that. And that's all to say that that is where a lot of times brands in the past have looked to collect their own first party data. And I think as those get more traction, same is true, I guess, of like the Fetch and Ibotta's of the world. There is definitely more and more. There are more tools open to brands to collect first party data in a retail environment than there have been.
Well, we've sort of teased in the session description as well. We haven't got to this yet. There's been a couple of nuggets along the way. A buyer's checklist.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're on the brand side or agency side, what kind of questions should you be asking, or like clues to look for when you're looking at RMNs to discover, are they really stewarding your hard earned dollars in the best way from a technology standpoint?
I'm gonna put a question in that's worth answering to help figure that out. How do you get beyond just the ROAS metric that they give you? Right, they're going to give you a result. Do you care about the quality that's underneath it? Right, the answer you're going to hear from the retailers is like, if we moved product, what do you care?
Yes. I've heard that. I've heard that.
And look,
Yeah.
publishers said the same. Everybody says the same thing. Like, look, if I did my job and you're happy, what do you care about how I did it? Well, you can. There might still be brand damage that gets caused. There might be things that you don't like or that you want to be sensitive to. So it's worth asking, what does my media plan look like? Where are you running? Where is this going? Can I see a site list of it? Can I get my log files? I think that's a big difference between using a retail media network to do your buying and using your own DSP to go do the buying. The DSP will definitely give you the log file back. The retail media network may not. And then getting into some of the deeper metrics, right? And be persistent in your asking, right? And make it a real thing. Don't make it as much as this is a checklist. Like, it's not a checklist item. It is something you have to do repeatedly and push them for it. And you'll probably get better results out of it, or at least the peace of mind that your media is running in good places or that the tech is good. That's my spiel.
One of the things to try to think through is how much of a marketplace is the retailer? Because a traditional retail media network, you just, O&O properties, you're buying keywords, things like that. The marketplaces, Amazon, Walmart, Target Plus, others, are now getting to a place where it's very clear that the PDP, the brand page, the shop page, whatever they call it, is really important. And as we move into a world where LLMs are potentially going to be looking for authority in those places, there needs to be ways of understanding the quality of those pages. And in the same way that, as when sponsored search marketplaces started up, initially, I remember when we first launched ours at Quotient, it was kind of like, well, whoever bids the highest, wins. And then we realized, oh no, we have to put relevancy in here. Otherwise, we're not going to get any clicks. I think the same kind of thinking in terms of relevance needs to be thought through. And this actually means that now, it's a buyer's checklist for brands, but actually brands are now on the hook for being publishers themselves in a marketplace. Whether they have to use, Flywheel's White Spider or somebody else to sort of get their Walmart page to look good enough. There's thinking around there that the quality score of that could be done by a third party, so that a buyer could understand, if I'm on this marketplace, how's my am I going to have an edge based on the fact that I've spent some time working on my brand page here? Or if I have a really good D2C site, is that going to help me connect to this brand in a more AI driven world of authority? So that whole area, I think, is an area where the ad tech providers could start to bring in quality scores, which is very much what we're seeing in the world of publishing that Scott and I talked about in our episode.
Yeah, in those PDPs though, it's like if you're only buying one retail media network, it doesn't really matter how good their PDPs are. You're just getting what it is. But when you start comparing multiple of them because you're in multiple distribution points, you'll start to see that some have a less friction in their checkout experience or in the conversion experience. So if you think of yourself as a real performance marketer, they're always looking at the funnel and where are the leaks in the funnel and where are users exiting. And so like the efficiency of your media and clicks, right? Are they like thinking about it through a funnel metric? And then when you look at various ones, you may say like, we might get a better ROAS here, but actually like this one's so much more efficient that we want to stay with the efficient one. I'd have to do some math to like prove that out to you that you go with a lower ROAS. But they need to, this is where you have to start delivering results, because if Instacart keeps telling you like, well, we can crush your CPC goals, that's not a problem. That's a real problem for individual retailers. Because they're
I think the point about the PDP quality is a really important factor in the equation, because if a retailer offers you limited ability to optimize what's on that page, what is the title, what does the creative look like, then that it does certainly factor into ROAS.
Well, I mean, if you think about it generally, up to now, retail media has very much been very locked down. It's there's picture, there's a card of the product with an image on it and a title, and really what you're doing is throwing a sponsored flag on it or maybe doing a price promotion. But as you see the retail media networks move into more interesting display placements, on-site display placements, off-site CTV placements, there's a lot more variation there, which could really sort of create differentiation. And I don't know if there's a way of making sure that's scored well. But again, from my gallery of CPG people, there's interest in how could this work to be a part of the JBP process. How do you link the quality of what the brand is doing, the traffic they're driving, and all of that kind of stuff into that process? And that's where I think retail media continues to be, we sort of talk about it in a negative way, that retail media is sort of like a retailer has got a generalist team that's kind of doing everything. There's a benefit to that to some extent, because the more holistic they look at the buying in the JBP process, the more they could potentially take over more and more of the media ecosystem. I don't know if that's controversial to you, Scott, but
you're good.
Well, we've ended up with more questions than we have time to answer, which is
we
really,
had
really
the speed questions, and we didn't.
we got JD a real quick answer for his.
Yeah.
Okay.
JD asks, there are industries in the ad tech world where the advertisers are paying publishers only for the conversion. Do you think retail media will move to a point where brands would stop paying for just an impression or a click and moving to conversion-based things? No. I don't think they move to a full CPA. I don't think there's enough in it. It's the shift from CPM to CPC and CPA or CPX is about risk, right? And in a CPM model, the buyer takes all of the risk and the seller takes no risk, but you also don't get any upside. So I think you will see CPC come in there, because it's a middle ground between CPM and full CPA. In a CPA, the buyer takes zero risk. You only pay when there's a conversion, and the seller takes all of the risk. In a CPC model, you kind of share that responsibility. Be like, look, I'm going to sell you a click. And they're like, okay, I'm going to buy a click, but I don't know if they convert. So you both have this thing in the middle where quality is really important. And I think we see a lot of CPCs competing, and then in the ad servers, they're all reducing to an eCPM, which is about how your quality score and how likely you are to get a click, which then the more efficient you are in getting clicks, the lower your eCPM, actually the higher your eCPM becomes, and a retailer wants to run you and they can lower your CPC for you. That's a long way of saying no. I don't think they'll ever move to a CPA model.
But I think it's a good thing that a lot of people probably they've been sitting in this sort of reservation CPM world, and they don't realize that to really unlock competition, you need to move into the middle of that of that set of business models from CPM to CPC to CPA.
Well, let's wrap it up there and leave the crowd wanting more. We have been Retail Media Breakfast Club and the Middlemen podcast, special crossover edition. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We might have to do another one.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you, Kiri, for setting this up. I really enjoyed it. Scott, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I had an absolute blast. This is my favorite topics and my favorite things with some amazing people. So thank you for having me, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody who commented and joined. Really appreciate it.